Hey, well, tonight I'm angry about Donald McNeil. And if you don't know who he is probably the most famous recent example of cancel culture. What is cancel culture? Cancel culture started when people were basically being shunned or forced to drop out of society because they had done something abhorrent, usually racist, something against women, something that we all could agree was beyond the pale. Now the question is, did Donald McNeil do something that was beyond the pale or not? The reason I'm bringing this up today is Donald McNeil just finished a career at the New York Times that spanned more than 40 years, but he did not leave voluntarily. He was forced out, and he was forced out because of cancel culture. What did he do? Well, he actually used the N-word. And the N-word is such a powerful word that I can't even use the N-word here on the show, or else I might be deplatformed immediately. The N-word has such weight and gravitas that the N-word is something that we can't even imagine hearing. And if somebody utters such a word, we are expected to admonish them immediately. The N-word is as bad as it gets today. So if Donald McNeil used the N-word, should he not be fired? Well, I believe context means something, and if you actually want to hear the story, you'll find it illuminating, because Donald McNeil did not use the N-word in any kind of pejorative manner. The story as it has come out over the last several weeks unfolds as follows. Donald McNeil was a Times reporter. The New York Times sells or rents or loans its reporters out to a tour company which solicits wealthy college students to go on tours or vacations with a Times reporter in attendance, providing historical detail, anthropological context, etc. And Donald McNeil in 2018 accompanied a class of this type to Machu Picchu in Peru and apparently had a tremendous time. So much so that they asked him to come back the following year, which is where the problems began on this 2019 trip. Donald McNeil goes down to Peru with a group of privileged high school students, and during the evenings they have a free-for-all, a dinner, and a question session where the students feel free to engage with McNeil on any topic that interests them. Some of the topics that came up involved politics, and McNeil displayed that he wasn't really aware of the modern milieu where one really can't discuss politics with anybody, especially not with impressionable, easily triggered teenagers. And that's exactly what happened, because one of the teenagers at the table with McNeil described a story where a friend of hers 2 years prior had been playing a game with a friend of hers, and both of them had been insulting each other, using slurs, using the N-word, using the R word, using the J word, using the A word, the B word, the C word, the D word, the E word, all the way through to the Z word. It was bedlam. And unfortunately, 2 years later, this friendship ended, and this friend of a friend released the information of what the girl in attendance at the dinner, what her friend had said. Her friend was disciplined. I think she may have even been expelled. And the student at the table with McNeil asked him, did he think that the punishment fit the crime? And McNeil, in asking about her use of the word, asked, did she use the N-word? But he used the full word, which is so bad that I can't even say it here. I believe it's like a religious incantation. Perhaps the YouTube gods will wipe me out. But the N-word was used, but it was used in a non-derogatory manner. It was used to clarify. It was used by someone who actually, interestingly enough, in 2002 won first place from the National Association of Black Journalists for his reporting. Ironically, these days, that counts for nothing. There were other issues that came up. One of the students asked if blackface was ever appropriate, or if cultural appropriation was ever appropriate. And McNeil answered quite honestly. In terms of blackface, he pointed out that in South Africa, where he had spent some time, there were mixed colored people, or black people, who actually did apply blackface during what they called the Coon Festival. Visitors, tourists hated the idea. As far as the locals were concerned, this was their culture. And he also asked the question, if Levi's were invented in San Francisco, should we be using them in New York? Is it okay to enjoy Chinese food? There are lots of questions one can ask when you get into the ridiculous idea of cultural appropriation. Everything is a melange and a mix, and all cultures should be incorporated into our ongoing journey. But that's a topic for another day. Today we're talking about the N-word, the R word, and the A through Z words. most of which we cannot mention today. So Donald McNeil attends this dinner. Donald McNeil, in attempting to understand what had happened to a friend, used the N-word. He has been fired. And the reason that I'm talking about this is his last day of employment was yesterday, the end of February, and today he's released a 4-part series. He's no longer employed by the New York Times, so it's on an external site, and I will link to it below. But he released a series describing exactly what had happened to him, and I believe him. This is a man who began as a copy boy at the New York Times 45 years ago in 1976 and has risen to actually be considered for a Pulitzer Prize last year. His reporting has won awards. He has never shown any sign of racism. Even black colleagues of his have claimed that he's never shown any signs of racism. But because 14 and 15-year-olds got triggered, because black employees at the New York Times got triggered, he is no longer a New York Times reporter. He is not deserving of this disdain. He has served with distinction around the world. He's never shown any sign of racism. He wasn't even racist on this trip. He was seeking clarification. If you don't use a word in a derogatory manner, no one can claim that it's derogatory. You know, the thought police are only one step below the grammar Nazis, and they are winning. The fact that Donald McNeil, a highly decorated journalist, a man with a 45-year career of covering interesting stories around the globe, the New York Times lead reporter on the COVID-19 story, he is just the latest example of what happens when you're caught up in today's system. Everybody worries about triggering. Everybody worries about what will your colleagues think. Nobody cares about what your rights to free speech are. And if you don't have free speech rights as a reporter, then surely nobody does. Donald McNeil did nothing wrong. Donald McNeil's career was ended prematurely, and today I'm angry about Donald McNeil. Please join me in waking up.